Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, June 28th, 2023. As you know, time for another show. And then which part did you know? That it was time for another show, or you already know that it was June 28th? Am I not telling you something? This is supposed to be a news program. All right. Well, we're just doing it for identifying the fact that we're not doing a rerun at the moment, because it is currently June 28th, 2023. If you ever hear this message again and it's not June 28th, 2023, well then, I'm a liar, I suppose, at that point. At any rate, okay, time for another show, and checking in on the various news items. A large raft of stories on its way down the Story River, I suppose, from Greg Dworkin. And, I'm reminded by the comments that Justice makes on his way to giving us the thumbs up that I guess I've entirely ignored this extremely important news story. I guess while we were busy looking at, former presidents committing espionage and possible civil war in Russia. The wildfires are back, by the way, and they never left, but the smoke, I should say, is back. That wasn't the story I was going to go with, but polluting the Midwest and surrounding environs this time. Apparently, Chicago, looking an awful lot like New York, looked in the morning of the worst smoke, a week or two ago. Just a general haze hanging over the city, and it's making its way back to here, too. I was surprised to see an air quality alert on our weather app today for that. We usually see that associated with extreme heat days as well during the summer, but not the case. We're not going to be experiencing the extreme heat today, just air quality alert out of nowhere because of the wildfire smoke. But on my way to reviewing the stories of the day, I was reminded that we haven't spoken, and with good reason, about the alleged fact. I mean, I don't read the news sources that would feature this, I guess, but allegedly, I don't know what the dispute was, but a fight of some sort has escalated to maybe an actual fight between Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg, which has escalated to the point where one has challenged the other. I believe Elon Musk has challenged Mark Zuckerberg to an actual ultimate fighting championship style cage match, which is an amazing thing to just even imagine a grown person challenging another one to do. Even if you are, honestly, a UFC fighter, challenging someone to a cage match. I don't even know if I remember correctly what that even is. I guess it stems from professional wrestling, and the idea is neither opponent can escape the ring if things get out of hand. What would get out of hand if you have a referee or whatever. But anyway, well, when it was performance, you understand what that adds to the performance, the excitement of thinking that some other thing is happening. But I don't know. Anyway, I guess it makes some amount of sense. Elon Musk is a super egotistical idiot, and Mark Zuckerberg apparently, he's also one of those, but apparently also doing some training just personally as a hobby in martial arts. So I don't know what this is supposed to mean, but at any rate, apparently Elon Musk's mother somehow got involved in all of this, and I don't know whether she intervened to try to stop the thing. Please don't stop the thing, Mom, because I'm just sort of thinking, I don't really care what happens in the fight. I was just thinking, I can't believe we'd be lucky enough to be able to get both Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg in cages, which would be fantastic for a number of reasons. That they would be in the same cage is just an incredible bonus. I can't believe the luck the universe would be bringing our way. And I think these cages, they have to be small enough to fit into some kind of a ring. I think they can be airlifted out of there by helicopter, which is a tremendous setup, really, honestly. And maybe Elon Musk's mom realizes just how dangerous it is. By the way, if they were to set up such a fight and Elon were to actually publicize it, wouldn't that be him broadcasting assassination coordinates and he should be banned from Twitter forever? I was just wondering. Anyway, I don't think the universe loves us enough to put the two of them in a cage anywhere anytime soon. But if it happens, then that's the end of the news era. At this point, we just say no more reporting anything. Everybody just all right. This is the end, the true end of history, I think. All right. Well, Greg Dworkin is here. You can't put Greg Dworkin in a cage. It doesn't matter how hard you try. Even if he consented to go in, I think the bars would just melt.
Like water just flows out, you know?
I think
but
so.
the thing is, I think that instead of putting him in a cage,
yeah,
and part of the idea of the cage is he can't get out, but I think also it didn't work out all that well because it restricted the wrestlers from jumping into the audience and grabbing bridge chairs and hitting people on the head with them, which is like part of the kayfabe.
Ahead of time. Or you can fold them and slide them in between the bars if people are creative enough.
Depending upon what kind of bars they are.
Yeah.
But I don't understand
chicken wire, you're out of luck.
Why you would want them in a cage.
I don't know. I mean,
you'd want them in a carbon fiber egg-shaped device where the top is bolted from the outside is what you'd want.
That's an interesting
thing. And then you'd
thing.
like to send them down to about 12,000 feet.
I mean, the idea was eventually to helicopter the thing out there and dump it in the ocean. I don't see any reason why we should wonder.
You could put Peter Thiel there. You know, you could put Harlan Crow there. You could put Leonard Leo there. Send them all down.
We could drop the cage on one of the other ones if they won't get in. But yeah, I mean, I thought if we just drop the cage in the ocean, it doesn't have to go down to 12,000. It will eventually, and take them with them. And somebody thought, this would be a great idea to actually submerge the cage and make it a shark cage match. Put a shark in there with them, and then see who wins that fight.
Why would you need a lawyer?
I'm hoping not to involve any of them, but well, it would be a great pay-per-view event. It would be the biggest one ever, and I'd love to see it happen. I don't know whether this thing goes forward or if it ever was going to, but I don't know. We have to be culturally abreast of things here, and if somebody starts making cage match jokes, we won't know what's going on unless we say that this happened.
And I'm okay if I don't get it.
Oh, well,
there's so much else I don't get. Modern music, all this stuff,
These kids today with their cage matches and
music. I'd still rather listen to the Doors and Jimi Hendrix, but that's the way it goes.
All right. Well,
although I'll make an exception for Prince.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean. Okay, I was
if he plays George,
boy, that'll make him happy, but obviously it won't. So now I'm sad. But okay, it's a good idea. We can't play any of that music here because royalties, and we can talk about it though. What else is happening? Any other things? Espionage?
For a quiet summer, there's a whole lot of stuff that's happening.
Smoke, for one thing.
Well, the pundit roundup today,
right? Punditry
was centered around a memo that Doug Sosnick wrote.
Doug Sosnick.
And the fact that Doug Sosnick, who is a veteran Democratic insider,
all right,
writes memos like this that affect all the reporters. All the reporters get the memo. They don't tell you they get the memo. They read the memo. They internalize the memo. They start spouting the memo. And you wonder where all of a sudden, how come everything all happened at the same time? Because insiders like Sosnick, have their ear.
Influencer.
Get the groupthink, and then you don't really understand what happens when the election actually happens. That's why I thought it was so interesting to go over it.
Okay. Yeah. That's a good, and it's also just a good primer on, this is the way punditry kind of works. Is they don't just sit there and think real hard.
So
somebody tells them.
Doug Sosnick.
Yes.
Who's a former Bill Clinton White House political advisor.
Okay. All right.
And updated the whole soccer mom security dad thing.
Okay. Hey, Jerry, got your memo. Loved it.
Yeah, got your memo. Now, the new term that you have to get used to, because you'll see it everywhere, are double doubters.
Double doubters. All right.
Yeah, you might see it phrased as double haters, but it's the same idea. People who have a negative view of both Biden and Trump and are perhaps the most important group of swing voters in the upcoming election.
Mm-hmm.
This is not an insignificant voting bloc. In an ABC Ipsos poll taken after Trump's most recent indictment, a majority of the country had a negative view of both Biden and Trump, with only 31% having a favorable view of both candidates.
A favorable view. That's going to be rare, yeah.
Yeah, it is going to be rare. I mean, for example, in the latest NBC poll, I think only 83% of Republicans hated Kamala Harris. I mean, just to give you an idea of where things stand generally with partisan thoughts. Okay. So the concept here, which is pushed by people like Sosnick, is that somehow or other, this is important.
Oh, well.
That these are the people that really matter. That everybody hates everybody. And therefore, by extrapolation, the election's obviously going to be close.
All right.
And all of this stuff seeps into like, okay, this is conventional wisdom. But let me point something out.
All right.
Which was pointed out by Connor Sen on Twitter, which I think was really, really helpful.
All right.
And he was taking, and I sent you a screen capture of it there. In the latest NBC News poll, Biden approval was 43 positive, 53 negative.
Okay.
Right? That generally is viewed by reporters as that's awful for Biden. I think anything under 30 is awful.
Yes.
Anything under 40 is bad. Mm-hmm. And 43 is like, this is what you would expect.
Yeah, these days I think that's probably
because
right.
Everybody on the other side, 100%, is going to hate you. And on your side, about 40% are going to think you haven't gone that far. You haven't gone far enough.
Yeah, yes, that's always true, too. Good reminder.
Right, so 43, 45,
healthcare
is typical.
Yeah.
Generic ballot, Democrats 48, Republicans 46. It's actually up a point for the Democrats.
Okay.
But here's the key.
Finally.
In the head-to-head, Biden beats Trump 49-45. Biden and DeSantis are tied at 47. I think all of that stuff is within margin of error. And none of that matters. Here's what matters. Versus Trump, Biden wins voters who somewhat disapprove of his job performance 50-39.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
All right? So the idea that you could hate them both is fine. And if you want to think that the double doubters are the people who will decide the election, then the election's already decided. Those people are voting for Biden.
I mean, that would be okay.
Right? Does that mean that the election won't be close? No, it'll probably still be close. Will Biden win? Yeah, probably, based on those people.
Okay, I mean...
But that's not included in the memo. The memo says, it's going to be close. Look how close things are. These are the people to watch. Okay, watch them. Watch them vote for Biden.
Yeah.
But don't internalize this to mean the election's going to be close. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. This is the kind of thinking that develops into there's a red wave, everybody knows.
Oh, I see. I mean, I was going to say it's not really all that helpful to tell people that the election's going to be close. Most elections are pretty close.
Most elections are close. But, sometimes they're not that close.
Yes, it's been rare to have a landslide these days, but also
even you can have a solid win, which was close in a lot of ways, but still pretty solid. That's what happened to Biden in 2020.
Yeah. I mean, in a presidential race, I mean, like a percentage point or two in difference. I mean, that's a tremendous number of voters. It's actually a substantial win.
Sosnick properly points out you have to concentrate on the swing states.
Okay.
You can forget about everybody else. It doesn't matter if Florida is a Republican vote sink or California is a Democratic vote sink. That's not what we're looking at. Everybody knows that there are more Republicans, more Republican votes and more votes for Trump overall in California than just about everywhere else.
Yes.
It didn't matter because of the Electoral College,
right.
But, the point is vote and concentrate on Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, New Hampshire, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and we'll have a lot to say about New Hampshire today.
All right.
Because that's where the presidential election will be decided.
Right. And
so we have those double doubters, we have those double haters, and although Sosnick says, watch him because it's going to be close, I say, they're voting for Biden.
Don't watch him. Or as you say, watch him vote for Biden. I mean, really, anybody who's like, well, I have my doubts about both of these people, anybody sane who says that, what they mean is, I doubt that I am in love with the policies of one of them, and the other one, I doubt that he should be out of a hospital.
Like that Biden's 80.
It could be anything, right? But it's not. I doubt. I doubt the sanity of a society that won't incarcerate the other guy. Yeah, I mean, there's doubts and there's doubts, as you said. This is like, again, we learned from the healthcare thing. I have my doubts about Obamacare. Oh, so they are against passing a healthcare reform bill. No, they just think it doesn't go far enough. Oh, one of those doubters. Yep. I see.
Now, the second group, and he has 4,
are
abortion rights voters.
That.
Now, the double downers are the most important, but abortion rights voters,
I don't think
the 2022 Supreme Court ruling overturning Roe v. Wade, another one of these guys that mentions Wade, not Dobbs, just like me, because like I'm old and it was already fixed in my head that Roe v. Wade is the thing, had a seismic impact on American politics and totally reshaped the outcome of the 2022 midterm elections. In fact, I would add, not him but me, that it was the thing that everybody missed that canceled out the red wave and almost won it for the Democrats.
A
couple of non-stupid decisions in places like New York might have won it for the Democrats, but things are what they are. Supreme Court, we'll get to that too, because that may have changed everything as well. In an NBC poll released this week, 61% of voters disapproved of the Supreme Court ruling overturning Roe v. Wade. Republicans still do not have an answer for it. Mike Pence says, well, I think we just need a national ban, is not the answer. That's not the answer they're looking for anyway. These are not the droids you're looking for. If you think that that's going to somehow win it for Republicans because everybody's going to rally around Pence, good luck.
Well,
keep watching the double doubters.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, you'd be better off watching the double doubters than believing anybody was going to rally behind Pence. And I don't think you should watch the double doubters. I'm with you. I think
third group, Republicans.
All right.
Not the most important in regard to what's going to decide the election, but in many ways the most interesting. The results in the 2022 midterms, as well as recent polling, suggest a group of Republican voters will be up for grabs in 2024, particularly if Trump is on the ballot.
All right.
That's an interesting observation that I think is true and underrated. But then again, that's my persuasion theory. There are people that really just despise Trump. Some of them will stay home.
That's good.
And that is good.
Yes.
And so that is an important group.
Some of them are double doubters.
Yep. Independents. The winning party in the last 4 election cycles carried political independence. The 2022 exit polls show that over 30% of voters were independents, the highest percentage since 1980. And I think that's true.
Okay.
So independents also are important, and we're going to get to a couple of things about them. But I think that setting it up that way is important, and I think it's also important to understand where the narrative comes from when you start seeing people say stuff that, like, their polling or information or interview that they just had doesn't really support, but they said it anyway. This is where this stuff comes from. It just seeps in. So you have to guard against that because groupthink.
Okay. I mean, I don't know. What do you think? Do you think I'll do the same as you about that groupthink thing? Oops. Are you still muted? Or are you mean to be?
We're back. No,
okay.
We're back. So,
I got
that's
lonely there
nationally.
Yes.
And let's look a little bit more at specifics, and that's in, for example, New Hampshire.
All right.
So St. Anselm, New Hampshire poll came out. Icky Trendline says Jacob Ravashkin for DeSantis.
Icky?
Trump is at 47 plus 5 since the last poll in April.
All right.
DeSantis is at 19. He lost 10 points.
Ooh.
Christie's at 6. He gained 5. Haley's at 5. She gained 1. Tim Scott gained 3, so he's at 4. Ramaswamy lost 1, so he's at 2.
You can ill afford that.
Burgum, one of the one of the Dakota governors, doesn't matter which one, is at 2.
Right.
And Hutchinson is at 2. Asa Hutchinson.
Where's Will Hurd?
And Mike Pence is at 2.
Plus 1.
And nobody heard of Hurd because he ain't on this.
Yeah, well, he's to wait until next week to get his 1. And then
in fact, that
the
Florida governor, nutcase Suarez, is on it at 0.
What? Oh.
But Hurd isn't on it.
Okay. Well, I I have no
Also,
reason for that.
no difference between Trump and DeSantis in the head-to-head matchups in this poll.
Oh.
Biden leads both candidates 49-40, which is about, he won New Hampshire by 7 points in 2020.
Oh.
And I think that in that sense, New Hampshire, the swing state, which leans Democrat, is giving you an idea of what the electorate is actually going to look like.
Okay.
Close but not close.
Yes, but not the part where the entire electorate is a member of the House of the Legislative House of Representatives. There,
yeah. Well, that doesn't disqualify them from voting. So
right.
It's interesting,
no.
but not important. The fact that
it's
everybody happens to be a member of the House in New Hampshire, you can still poll them.
Yes, no, you can do that, but to the extent that would involve any differences, that's not applicable to other states.
Yeah,
I don't think it changes things. It just means you can catch them all in one place.
Now, as we're talking about DeSantis dropping in that poll, Simon Rosenberg found another poll, which I think is just fascinating. This is a national poll, and it's civics, which is associated with Daily Kos.
Ah.
And Ron DeSantis' favorable rating with registered voters nationally. 43,769 responses. Civics is a pretty good poll. Remember, we always call it the poll that doesn't move? This one moved.
Oh.
So there's a big picture of it. I sent you, but I'll send it again just to make sure that you have it right at the bottom there.
Here, I think I actually
it's
have
enormous,
it
so it's easy to find.
Oh, all right.
But anyway,
red
there it is.
And blue and
I got all sorts of stuff there, but this one is in blue and orange.
That's the one. Oh, orange. Okay.
Do you have a favorable or unfavorable opinion around DeSantis? And the poll that didn't move
Yes.
didn't move until DeSantis declared he wanted to be president. People started to look at him.
Ah.
And he basically went from 45-45 to 56 hate him and 34% like him.
Well.
Unfavorable 56, favorable 34. I mean, he's plunged.
Yes. The unsure line doesn't move.
The unsure line doesn't move.
So.
But, to know him is to hate him. So the idea that, Ron DeSantis will be the stronger candidate against Biden. It's a good thing Biden is running against Trump. No.
It looks about
DeSantis is running head-to-head with Biden just the same as Trump is. And most of the polls that show DeSantis doing a little better are DeSantis polls released by the DeSantis campaign. But in fact, to know him is to hate him, as the civics poll clearly shows. And the idea that DeSantis is only going to become more popular as time goes on, you haven't met him.
I guess not. I mean, it almost makes me want to believe that people are paying attention. Wait till he tries to kiss your
baby and accidentally drops him,
Accidentally. Probably spike him.
Like Bill de Blasio does with groundhogs.
That's true. And a sore point among groundhogs. Watch out for the double-downing groundhogs.
So Simon Rosenberg looked at this, the Hopium guy, says DeSantis is remarkably unpopular with the overall electorate, and in some polls is much more unpopular than Biden. And then mentions this brutal civics poll.
You might conclude that the policies are horrible if you believe that people paid attention to policy.
Well, yeah, but it's
hard to believe
two factors there.
Yeah.
The smaller factor is that actually there's three things.
All right.
There's three. No, there's four. There's three things here. The policy sucks, but that's probably the smallest of them.
Okay.
To know him is to hate him, and now he's been exposed on a larger scale, and he can't do retail politics, so he's tanking in New Hampshire and possibly Iowa. Okay.
The retail
That's
states.
a second factor. The third and probably the biggest factor, Trump is unloading on him. And so you don't just have Democrats who think he's a jerk. Now you have Republicans who think he's a jerk because Trump told them to think that.
All right.
And that's one of the reasons why he's plummeted. And DeSantis doesn't have an answer for it, and that's part of the reason why, he's a loser.
Yes. I mean, it's interesting. He copies every other Trump policy and Trump move, and the obvious answer is copy the attack move. But he won't do that because then he's afraid of losing Trump supporters. But he's losing Trump supporters because Trump supporters are hearing that he sucks. So I don't know what.
And so Simon Rosenberg follows this up. DeSantis' world is spinning. He's doing better in the general than Trump. But that's not true.
All right.
The Real Clear Politics average has Trump outperforming DeSantis versus Biden. In the last 3 Real Clear Politics polls, Biden's beating DeSantis by an average of 3. DeSantis seems to be cratering in GOP primary, and then uses the New Hampshire example. And a very large sample, general election poll, not in Real Clear Politics average, which is Morning Consult, which RCP doesn't use. Trump 44, Biden 41, Biden 42, DeSantis 40.
All right.
So, whether that's true or not true, overall as a final result, the point is there's really no evidence DeSantis does better.
Fine.
And when you look at his, do you like him or not, you totally understand why.
Yeah. Well, he's been, he's as you mentioned, terrible retail politics, which is going to just compound things. But yeah, I never really understood the idea of, well, I'll just take the Trump playbook and be Trumpier than Trump on policy, but the policies are enormously unpopular. But maybe he didn't believe that at the time. But I suppose if you then add, and also I'm just in person a horrible person to meet or to talk with, and well, that'll set you back. Your ceiling will be Trump minus however bad you are at retail politics. I mean, that's an easy formula.
And again, remember, we make the distinction between political sentiment and political opinion. Opinions picked up on the poll. Sentiment is something a little different. Mm-hmm. And let me give you 3 stories in the last few seconds before the break.
Yes.
1, U.S. far more globally popular under Biden than it was in the Trump era. New poll out today.
Good.
2, most Americans support U.S. arming Ukraine after the debacle in Russia with Yevgeny Prigozhin.
Yes.
65% respondents approving of the shipments, and that's way up compared to 46 in a May poll.
All right.
And 3rd, civics shows that people's views of the economy are improving. All of these are going to help Biden get reelected, is what I'm trying to tell you.
Okay, I'm trying to hear that.
The last one, the most important.
Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's continue with our roundup and analysis and
well, again,
come up with a new
I'm not trying to make the
category
case
for people.
Biden's a lock. I'm not trying to make the case Biden's going to win
I don't think
going
you've
away.
made that.
I am making the case he's doing all right given everything. And that if you step back and look at, quote, the environment, look at the environment. How could, environment's actually pretty good for him. It's only getting better, too.
Environment. Okay. I mean, yes, I think that's true. Abortion still, to me, I don't know why it got listed number 2 there.
It's still number 1.
Yeah, he lists it as number 2 because there's no profit in saying the other guy's thing is actually number 1. But I've discovered an interesting number 2. No. But so you got to circulate memos that
he
say
didn't have
my
a term
thing
for
is
it.
important.
He's got a label. He's got a brand,
Yeah.
double doubters. That's got to be number one because I came up with that term. You know, let's abortion
agreeers
voters. Well, they're the ones that are going to decide the election. In fact, see Kansas, but everybody says abortion voters, so I got nothing there.
Right.
So I'll list it number two. I think the fact that Republicans actually, some of them don't like Trump, that's kind of important, even though it's a very small number.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And independents, everybody always does independents. Nothing new about that. So I'll list them last.
Right. Okay. Yeah. It's as memos go. Well, first of all, don't send me any memos. But other than that, harmless memo.
I sent you the memo.
Yeah, right. I know. This is, Washington works on people sending unsolicited memos. That is a huge, huge thing here. Now they're called Substacks.
Okay.
And you have to pay for them, which is crazy.
Which is even worse, right?
Yeah. So
I just sent you this thing that you need to pay for that I'm sure you wanted.
Oh, yes. Right. Sign up here. And if you don't, well, we'll just keep sending you them because it's important to me that everybody think I am influencing things.
Anyway, the talk of the town,
yes,
as Variety might say, talk of town Trump tapes.
Yeah.
So the audio tape, not the original tape, which is also talk of the town. That was the one to Brad Raffensperger that got Raffensperger a trip to the D.C. grand jury for Jack Smith.
Right.
That's a story.
Free
But,
trip. I think he's
part
Atlanta,
of the story is that the Trump tape, where he basically admits to his guilt, has been a 2-3 day story that doesn't seem to be going away. And it's awfully important, and that's part of the whole situation.
Yeah, tapes.
And again, brings up something we brought up on the show a couple of weeks ago, which is how come Jack Smith hasn't charged him in New Jersey? And we still don't know.
Right. Although, what we brought up was, hey, he might charge him in New Jersey. That was news to us. Now, I guess the day after, well, why haven't you done it already? We're very impatient people.
Yeah, it takes time to build a case, though. So that's, part and parcel of what's going on.
Yes. And we are discovering more and more. There's more and more news items saying, he's been actually looking at the New Jersey thing. We were always wondering, well, why didn't you search Bedminster? No, they were.
Why aren't you telling me everything you're doing so
Yes.
I can, have some informed comment about how I can criticize you?
I like information just as much as the next guy. But yeah, they've done a good job holding things closely, which, by the way, only undermines all of Trump's claims. The only things that he can say about things like this tape as well. They're leaking this tape. The one thing they're not doing a lot of is leaking. That's their
right.
That's their
So,
strength.
if that tape was leaked, it came from the Trump side.
Yes.
Or it came from
almost
the
certainly.
people
which is
who were
crazy.
writing the book for Mark Meadows, who were the women that Trump was showing off to.
Right. So I would think it's
and
from
don't
one
you
of
think
those
that
sources.
if Jack Smith subpoenas them, they're going to fold like a cheap card table?
I think that he already has, and I think that might be how he got the tapes.
So, but that doesn't mean that that's where the tapes came from. It doesn't necessarily come from DOJ.
The public release of them, no. But if you're wondering why would Trump leak tapes of him confessing to espionage, the answer is in the tape itself. The one thing he says is, what he's saying in the tape is, this totally proves my case. I mean, he believes that this is good for him because he's an idiot. Why would anybody leak tapes of evidence that he was right about everything that he said?
Alternative explanation: he always leaks tapes of bad news so he can get out of this in front of the story and put his own spin on it first.
True, that could also be it. I am not certain whether he thought that was bad news or not, but if so, then one of his new lawyers is working very well and telling him the truth.
Right. So this is a Politico playbook piece, which is on a slightly different topic, but one like the Doug Sosnick memo for insiders.
All right.
Helps explain a lot of how Washington works. And I was just astounded when I read it, not because of the information contained therein, but rather how explicit it was.
Oh, that sounds like fun. Do I need a censorship?
No, not that kind of explicit.
Oh, rats. All right.
Sort of let me put it in context. Let's say that Harlan Crow, Leonard Leo, Paul Singer discovered this week that Clarence Thomas and Alito
Raising
aligned
prices.
with Sotomayor and Kagan and Jackson and voted with the liberals.
All right.
Can you imagine and feel their fury?
I guess
I
so.
paid for these people.
Yeah,
How
right.
dare they?
Right. I want to speak to a manager, the marshal.
I mean, just absolute fury about the fact that they cleanly, with good money, honest money, bought these people, and how dare they?
I could have
And
brought
the fury
somebody else
that
in
would
that
ensue.
empty airplane seat.
I'm just setting the stage for you.
All right. Sure.
All right. So what's the story? The story is that Trump is mad at McCarthy, Kevin McCarthy.
Oh, for the same reason?
Well, the same
Or
kind
similar?
of fury.
Okay. He's not doing the thing.
You're driving the day. My Kevin.
Oh, yeah.
Former President Donald Trump has
remember
catapulted the career of many a Republican over the past 8 years. None, however, have benefited from his favor more than Kevin McCarthy. In every conceivable way, the House Speaker owes his gavel to Trump. That's what I mean about being explicit about it.
I see.
Trump owns McCarthy. When you look at his maneuvers, whether it's, why should I block impeaching Biden?
All right. Okay.
Whether you look at what he did with the debt ceiling, whatever it is, why would McCarthy do that? Why doesn't he just get the moderates to vote with Democrats and just fix things? It's because Donald Trump owns Kevin McCarthy.
Yeah. All right. Sure.
And if you look at it that way, you'll totally understand why he never does anything reasonable. The former president embraced McCarthy during his time in the White House, elevating the California Republican as they feuded with other GOP congressional leaders. This is the part I liked. He personally intervened in January to ensure McCarthy won his dream job, convincing his critics to stand down amid a battle for the speakership.
Okay.
In Trump's way of thinking, Kevin McCarthy's career, Trump's responsible for it. Trump owns him. And the
sure you'd like
fury
to think so,
that
yeah.
Trump has at this guy that he owns, well, that's why it came as a shock yesterday when McCarthy disrespected Trump in a NBC interview, openly questioning whether Trump would be Republicans' best presidential nominee. Can he win the election? Sure. The question is he the strongest to win the election? I don't know the answer. And
No.
Trump world flipped out. This is according to Politico Playbook. We're told top aides to the former president and allies who knew both men quickly traded messages asking, what the F?
Aha.
Some call McCarthy a moron. Others looked at
I
Trump
did too.
campaign hand Brian Jack, who advises the speaker. And McCarthy immediately pivoted into cleanup mode and said, well, he's stronger today than he was in 2016. And this morning, says Politico, we can report that none of these moves have assuaged the fury in Trump's inner circle. McCarthy, they feel, has taken advantage of the former president when it benefits him, failed to show unflinching loyalty in return. They don't understand how he could misspeak. And McCarthy's damage control made things worse because then McCarthy started fundraising off of it. And fundraising without Trump's permission is
I didn't
worse
get a cut.
than Ron DeSantis going up to New Hampshire and scheduling an event opposite the New Hampshire Republican Women's Club, which he did, by the way, and got them pissed off, which you don't do in New Hampshire.
All right. I mean, I don't know.
So Trump
he
is
said you were
furious
paid by
at McCarthy because McCarthy's not being loyal enough. Because he said something equivocal instead of super strong. Of course, Trump is right about everything. But the background to the story is the interesting part, which is to say Trump feels like he owns McCarthy. This is why he feels like he owns McCarthy. And therefore, he would expect everything McCarthy does to be something that would benefit Trump. And Trump is really the one that's pulling the strings here. And he's really ticked off now because McCarthy is showing disloyalty at a time that's crucial during this primary where Trump needs to, consolidate everything. So he's furious.
All right.
McCarthy, hearing about this, immediately runs and tries to kiss the ring and say, this was all a misunderstanding.
Oh, don't worry about that.
And, when you look at Kevin McCarthy's moves as speaker, his relationship with the Freedom Caucus and such, how does Trump pull McCarthy's strings? He pulls McCarthy's strings by pulling the Freedom Caucus strings.
Yeah. Sure. I understand that.
Right. Yesterday's drama, it goes on to say, came at a sensitive moment with a major question: why hasn't McCarthy endorsed Trump? Trump's allies aren't buying any excuses. At what point is it okay for Kevin McCarthy not to endorse Trump? The consultant, unnamed above, said. Donald Trump's been very good to Kevin McCarthy. And how long will Trump support McCarthy? Many of the ex-president's strongest allies in Congress have been stacking up their grievances against McCarthy. And the same GOP consultant said if Donald Trump wanted, he could have him out as Speaker by the end of the week.
Yeah, so why do you want his endorsement? He's going to be
Because it looks
thrown
good.
over the side. I guess so. He thinks it does anyway.
I mean, this is Putin being mad at Lukashenko over in Belarus for not endorsing Putin's plans.
I guess.
We know who's in charge, and we know what we expect from our puppet.
Yeah.
And if you don't do it, we're going to be mad at you.
But that's his natural state.
Sure. But, it puts McCarthy's positioning just in crystal clarity here. Because, basically, what if Trump withdraws support? What if Trump agitates among the Freedom Caucus to get rid of McCarthy? It'll happen.
Yeah. So?
Will he? I don't know. But, McCarthy is so dependent upon this.
I guess
he's afraid of his own shadow, and that's why he acts the way he acts. That's why he does what he does. It's really helpful in understanding you'd think that the speaker has all these tools and could do this and do that, but with this in the background, negates most of the stuff the speaker could do.
Yes. Well, he has to.
What are you going to do?
To
Threaten them with
troops.
Fundraising withhold? Well, they don't need him for that.
I guess, although it would probably be wise for him to say, you don't think Trump is going to fill that hole, do you? Because he's not going to give you his money.
No, Trump's going to suck up the money and use it for legal defense. If McCarthy was smart, he'd do that. McCarthy's not a smart guy.
Well, that might be the issue right there. He's not that smart. I guess I would also, if someone, I don't know, no one's going to convince Trump of anything. But I mean, at some point, I guess you could say to the people around him who observe things, or just people not around him, but who observe Trump, and say, I know you feel ill-served by this speakership that you bought, but honestly, sir, with tears streaming down my eyes, when has anything you've ever bought worked out for you? Everything
the other side
sucks.
of the coin is, again, I'm looking at McCarthy. Trump is Trump. Everybody expects him to be who he is. But if you're going to step back and look at McCarthy, you have to say to yourself, look, I know you're weak. I know you're stupid. I know you're a little man. But how weak and how stupid and how little of a man must you be if you put yourself in the position of being totally dependent on Trump, given that Trump is who he is?
And that you believe he was paid by Putin until you weren't allowed to say that anymore.
Right. And now we're seeing what that means.
Yeah.
It's crazy stuff. And so I understand, a little bit more about why McCarthy does what he does, but I don't understand how he got himself in this position in the first place. The ambition, the overriding ambition must be so strong that you were willing to do anything, literally anything. And this is the anything. Ally yourself with Trump in order to get the job. Fine.
I mean, he gets his portrait
and
painted.
reports are McCarthy has absolutely no vision of anything except the next 24 hours. And that totally fits in with this.
Yeah.
I need to do this in order to win the speakership. There's a vote coming up tomorrow. Do what you need to do. I'll worry about the day after. The day after comes, he has no plan. He has no clue. He has no idea what to do.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's it. Well, why do you want to be speaker? Well, you get a car picks you up from the house, and I don't have to commute to work anymore. A car scoops me up, and I get some guards, and there's a little extra pay. You get your name in a newspaper a lot. You're famous. You get your portrait painted. You go down in history. That's it, though. Other than that,
it's astounding. It's sad, And again, it's just the way it is, and that's why in a very hyper-partisan environment, clowns like this still have a chance, as he showed in 2022, of being the speaker, because the Republicans could win close elections. With all of this going on, with all the obvious stuff about how bad some of these Republicans are, how can it be that Republicans are still even in the running? And the answer is, of course, you have to be an old-time 70s, 80s Yankee fans to understand it.
Oh.
Well, George Steinbrenner owns a team. He's Donald Trump. He's terrible.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Yeah,
he's
but,
considerably
the
better
Yankees.
than Donald Trump.
What do you
that's
expect me to
true.
do? Root for the Red Sox?
Well, yeah, you don't have that much choice there. I give Steinbrenner some more credit as a businessman than Trump in the sense of having things work out. Like, eventually they got good again.
Maybe a better businessman, but no better in terms of his politics.
No. Oh, no. Well, no,
And
but you could safely
personality,
ignore that.
no, same.
That's true.
He was
But he
awful.
only ruined the
He was
Yankees.
a terrible person. Black. It's the Yankees.
Yeah.
What do you expect me to do?
Right. And, people, sports
Not rooting
teams.
for the Mets, not
Right.
rooting for the Red Sox. What do you expect me to do?
All right. It's the only game in town. And people like to commiserate about it their team doing poorly. Not so
and
much
if you
their
understand
country.
that, you'll understand why Republicans still stick with Trump.
Yes.
Some
I
of
guess
them,
so.
anyway.
Yeah. That's right.
And some of them, it gets to the point where it's so bad that I had enough.
Right. I mean, there are plenty of people. I'm not going to vote for
Doesn't make me a Red
Democrats.
Sox fan, but maybe I just won't watch baseball.
Yeah. That's not a bad analogy, that one. Right? They're not going to vote for the other team. They're just not. No matter what but they're the best. They're doing great. The economy in Boston is fantastic. Won't matter.
Right.
Okay.
So Steve Bennett had an interesting piece here. Why Trump's weird reaction to the audio recording matters.
Well, everything matters.
Everything matters.
Unless nothing matters. That's
Exactly
true.
right.
I wanna remind
To briefly
people of
recap
that.
for those who might benefit from a refresher, in 2021, Trump was recording referencing a planning document related to Iran, which the former president took with him after leaving office. The Republican had apparently learned of an article in the New Yorker that referenced General Mark Milley, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, having played a role in preventing Trump from launching a military offensive against Iran. This annoyed Trump, who said he'd held on to a secret war plan related to Iran, which had been prepared by Milley and his team. It's not true, by the way. It was prepared before Milley even got there. And Milley is
that's
still,
interesting.
in his position. So this is perhaps a still active document, and which the former president wished to show the public to help bolster his point, pushing back against the general's comments. On the newly released recording, we hear Trump shuffling through papers and apparently presenting a war plan to a writer as part of his criticism of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Right. That writer was a ghostwriter for Mark Meadows, who was doing a book.
Yes.
So it's a Mark Meadows staffer. So, are they sympathetic to Trump? Of course they are.
Mm-hmm.
Secret.
Yeah.
This is secret information. Look at this, Trump said. Isn't this incredible? At one point, pointing to a Pentagon document, he declared, "These are the papers. This was done by the military and given to me. As president, I could have declassified. Now I can't, but this is still a secret. It is so cool."
Yes.
Right? And then when Brett Baier asked him about it, Trump said, well, there's no document there. It's not a document. There was nothing to classify. These are newspaper articles, magazine stories, articles, dirty underwear, old shoes, whatever. And now it appears he was lying.
Well, it appears so, although no more so than it did before. I mean, he still could be insane and was waving some other papers, but all we have is audio. I guess we have to have testimony.
Well, again, as you pointed out, and
circumstantial
Steve Bennett
evidence.
points out, he used the word exonerated. The tape exonerates me.
Yes.
What that means, translated, is he's in real trouble.
And
then gives examples. In March 2018, Trump claimed the House Intelligence Committee completely exonerated him in the Russia scandal. It didn't. In June 2018, Trump said the Justice Department Inspector General's office had totally exonerated him in the Russia scandal. It didn't. Right. In February 2019, Trump claimed that the Senate Intelligence Committee had exonerated him in the Russia scandal. That also wasn't true. Mm-hmm. In March 2019, Trump claimed the judge in the Paul Manafort trial exonerated him. That also wasn't true. In June 2021, Trump claimed he'd been totally exonerated by testimony from Don McGahn, which was the opposite of what was said there. And in February 2023, Trump claimed to have total exoneration from the special grand jury in Fulton County, Georgia.
Yeah.
And in June 2023, Trump pretended that a devastating audio recording in which he appears to have admitted to committing crimes is actually an exoneration.
Sure.
So either the former president doesn't know what exonerated means, or he's desperately trying to deceive the public about his culpability in a variety of serious scandals. So he points out there's a whole history of Trump using the term exonerated. And whenever he says that, it means the opposite.
Well, yes, but there's a whole history of him using any word you could possibly imagine, and it means the
But
opposite.
that particular word has a linked history.
It does. And, I guess I would hold that up alongside the next exoneration claim he's planning to make, the expungement of his impeachments in the House, which isn't a thing, but we'll claim that means he's exonerated and that this part of history didn't happen.
It isn't a thing. But why would Kevin McCarthy go along with that?
Right.
The last segment.
Yes.
It's because Trump wants it, and so he's beholden.
Yeah, so he has to do it.
So he has to do it.
And it's not a thing, and it makes him look dumb, but I don't care. Go ahead and do it. And then, moving into the next segment, Trump will say, I've been exonerated in the impeachments, even though, actually his better bet at saying being exonerated was, I was found not guilty. That actually did happen.
Hey,
but
can
for some
I
reason he wants
be
to erase
totally
that.
honest with you here?
No.
And personal?
I can't stop you. Wait a minute. I think I can. If I hit the right button, I can stop you. But
get
go
your
ahead.
buttons ready to get the
Get
the
in this
recording.
cage and
Get the
now go
foghorn
ahead.
just in case you need.
Okay.
I don't think I've ever been exonerated of anything. I don't think I've ever used the word. I don't think I've ever had recourse to.
Right.
I don't think I've ever needed to.
Have
Steve
you
Bennett
ever?
just gave like 9 or 10 examples of where he used it.
That's right. It's never occurred. I've never had to be. I've also never had a reprieve offered of let's say a death sentence.
Or
the
a
governor
pardon.
has never called and said, "Don't electrocute him." After all, but that's just because I never ended up in that position. That's true.
Yeah.
Good point. I've never had an ankle monitor removed. As a matter of fact. I mean, there's a lot of things that I haven't done that he has, but he's been exonerated a lot. That's for sure. Except that, of course, as it happens, he hasn't been. He just thinks he has. But it's an interesting mindset to constantly be thinking you were exonerated, which just, of course, means that most people suspect you of having done wrong in many, many, many situations. Just not you. You think you were right.
Right. And again, just sometimes reality checks are useful. This is a piece from Roger Parloff in Lawfare,
Sounds
which is called
reality-ish.
703 Ways Trump's Mar-a-Lago Conduct Bears No Resemblance to Hillary Clinton's emails.
Oh my gosh, is this literally 703 or is this some reference to
I don't know.
the number of emails or I don't know what? Okay, let's find out. It looks long enough to be about 703 things.
It's about 703 pages.
Okay. All right. What are they?
But, I think in this very long piece, the paragraph I just want to pull here, is there a different standard for a Democratic Secretary of State versus a former Republican president? Asked Florida Governor and Republican presidential hopeful Ron DeSantis shortly after news of Trump's classified documents indictment broke. I think there needs to be one standard to justice in this country. Many Republicans who know in their guts that, as I will establish in this piece, Trump's conduct is palpably different, are publicly encouraging the corrosive myth that a double standard has been applied. Your Senator Lindsey Graham doing just that on ABC this week, earlier this month. Most Republicans believe we live in a country where Hillary Clinton did very similar things and nothing happened to her. Note that Graham didn't say he believed we lived in that world.
Okay.
But he managed to leave the impression he was sympathetic to that view and that Republicans who held it were justified in doing so. That's really the point of his piece. And no, they're not anything like that. Even Fox News chief political analyst Brit Hume, while voicing concerns about Trump's conduct, did a version of the many Republicans believe dodge.
Okay.
Yeah. For the record, he brings James Comey. What Brit Hume said was, at the same time, we're going to hear an awful lot about the unequal application of justice, and perhaps from Trump's defense team in light of the way the Hillary Clinton case was handled where James Comey, then FBI director, had conducted an investigation of her handling of material at her home and outlined a case that he said could be brought but shouldn't be. He didn't dispute her guilt, says Brit Hume.
Okay.
Parloff says, for the record, Comey did dispute Clinton's guilt. His view was, quote, no reasonable prosecutor would bring such a case, end quote.
Oh. Yes.
So
it's
the
certainly
things they
close,
say are just
not
wrong
right on
and
the money.
lies. And importantly, the crux of Clinton's case, unlike Trump's, was about gradations of carelessness, recklessness, and gross negligence, states of mind that can constitute felonies only in rare situations, like manslaughter. This fact alone already makes Clinton's case qualitatively different from Trump's. None of the 7 crimes that a Florida grand jury found Trump to have committed hinges on proving a defendant's extreme carelessness. Trump is accused of acting with intent, knowingly, willfully, and corruptly. That's different.
Yes.
And of doing so over a period of 18 months.
In some of
That's different. The indictment alleges he told bald-faced lies to at least 2 of his own lawyers. That's different.
Yeah, that's a problem too.
So he's just trying to make the point that you can use that what about, but no, it doesn't fly.
Yeah, well, not when you're on tape saying, look at this thing you're not allowed to look at.
Right. So, yeah, we have a habit of hearing him say things like Clinton or Hunter Biden and just automatically dismissing it. And Parlef just has a documented list of why that's okay.
Oh, all right. Well, good. At least you're doing fine. If you don't want to read it, you're on the right track.
Yep, exactly right.
Okay. Well, that is a nice roundup. And,
so that's it.
Okay, good and well summarized.
We're out of time.
Yes.
We'll have to leave it there.
Yeah. However,
tomorrow.
We can. Yeah. Well, that's basically it. That's the one part.
Not you. You still got an hour to do.
Yeah. Right. But it's all preparation for tomorrow, really, when you get right down to it. Okay. Well, great. Thank you. And getting through a lawfare article and still having time on the other side is no small thing.
Right. Maybe I'll leave you with this David Firestone piece, which I had in the Pundit Roundup today, which I thought was pretty funny.
All right.
Handy guide to the Republican definition of a crime.
Okay.
Right? For example, what's not a crime? Federal crimes. They commit them all the time.
Okay.
What's a crime? State and local crimes, if they happen in an urban area or in states run by Democrats. Now, those are crimes.
Yes,
They're brutal crimes.
Robbery, when other people rob people.
Not a crime. Any crime that happens in rural areas or states run by Republicans.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Crime, what they imagine Hunter Biden did. Not a crime, what Hunter Biden pled guilty to.
Okay. Even they think
not a crime, what the Trump family did. Right, and then gets to the Roger Parloff piece. Crime, Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server while she was Secretary of State. Not a crime. Donald Trump's mishandling of government secrets.
Right. It wasn't mishandling. It was just regular handling.
Yeah, he's totally exonerated.
Right. Okay, well, I mean, that's basically it. That's just the Gimmitarian credo also. So it's another way of putting it. Everybody's adopting the same model, just using different instruments. Double doubting the law, for instance.
Anyway, so if you take nothing away but this, just remember, Biden's not that popular, but he'll probably win anyway.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We enter into the Greg Dworkin-less hour, the dark zone here, where Greg is back at home and enjoying his morning. Let's see. There was a couple of things I wanted to check in on, and I realized, there was a email awaiting for me about this. Oh, yes, right. Reminding me of another thing that I hadn't gotten to yet. Jeremy Freiberger having written 2 days ago saying that, or reminding me that of a story I did see covered over at Daily Kos. It's not that we're all ignoring it. It's just me. But Fox News has reshuffled its lineup to permanently, I guess, fill the slot that was vacated by Tucker Carlson when he was kicked out. I guess we could say unceremoniously, although they may have had a ceremony. I don't know. At any rate, like an exorcism, I think is what I had in mind. Anyway, his time slot now goes to Jesse Waters, who is essentially Tucker Carlson light, and I guess would probably be using this promotion and this opportunity to Tucker Carlsonify himself further. I mean, he's a despicable guy in his own right, so it's zero improvement, and of course, zero lessons learned by Fox, except, what did we think they were going to do? Anyway, let me see. What is his email says, for several years, he says, I've felt that Jesse Watters has been Fox News' most closely similar figure to the kind of extreme toxicity that Tucker Carlson represents. Harris Faulkner is a close second. We put this on the record for this purpose. He goes on to say, thus, I've also felt, ever since Carlson was fired, that Watters would take Carlson's nighttime spot. Expect Watters to quickly become the far right's next Fox darling. I should have publicly made this prediction back when it mattered. So that's why I guess he's now making the Harris Faulkner comparison, because I don't know anything about Harris Faulkner. So there you go. You're on the record early for that one. It's true. Good call. And in hindsight, certainly it was fairly obvious that would be the replacement. He's a very much a Tucker Carlson-ish kind of guy in many ways. He's got his own style to him, but essentially, well, I don't know. May it do him no good. So let's see. All right. Let's see. What else do we have to catch up with? There's plenty, lots in pocket. Let's go there now and take a quick look. All right. I mentioned the expungement effort earlier in the show, and Amanda Marcotte has some views on that, which I thought would be wise to share in sort of setting the scene here. I mean, we've gone over how it's not a thing, but that there's no stopping a determined House from adopting such a resolution if they want to. It's of questionable value, but it'll be of it's of questionable legal and historical value, but it'll be of unquestioned public relations value to Trump. But why and in what sense? And this is what she's addressing here. More than Trump ego maintenance, the GOP move to, quote, expunge impeachment is part of their war on history. And I guess it ought to be considered alongside the book bans and insistences that certain AP courses be removed from the curriculum in Florida, et cetera, et cetera. Authoritarians don't just want to control the distant past. They feel entitled to erase events we all remember. Like, I know that on a certain level, the analysis of the expungement thing is, we all saw it. What do you think is going to happen from this? And they actually do think something is going to happen from that. But, we were examining it on other levels. But let's go back down we'll take it to their level. Why not? As part of their apparent mission to be the dumbest congressional majority in history, last week House Republicans introduced resolutions, I'm sure, to, quote, expunge Donald Trump's 2 impeachments. Representative Elise Stefanik of New York and Representative Murdery Trader Green of Georgia brought forward 2 resolutions claiming that, as if by magic, they can make it as if such articles had never been passed. And that's the quote from them. Speaker of the House Kevin McCarthy is fully on board with these efforts, even though, as Eugene Robinson of the Washington Post wrote, expunging a presidential impeachment is not a thing. Now, what is a thing? Well, she gets to that next. Gaslighting. It's an overused term, but this is an iconic example of it, telling people that what they witnessed with their own eyes never happened. Their authentic memories are delusions, and that the delusions of the gaslighter are reality. It's one of Trump's favorite tricks, as evidenced by his first action as president, denying the photographic evidence showing the paltry turnout at his own inauguration. This bit of silliness is getting covered in the mainstream media, but only with a few perfunctory Republicans are weird stories before the punditry moves on to more serious issues. The assumption is that this is yet another example of the House GOP's devotion to soothing Trump's endlessly hurt feelings, a job so immense it requires the round-the-clock efforts of 222 Republican members of Congress. But while their Trump ass-kissing duties are a major impetus for this move, it's far from the only one. This effort to rewrite recent history must be understood in the light of the larger Republican effort to rewrite all American history, with an eye toward denying the demonstrable damage that white nationalism and other right-wing ideologies have wrought. There's a direct line between banning books because they tell the truth about slavery and Jim Crow to this current effort to supplant the truth about Trump's crimes with GOP fantasies. Quite true. One common thread tying all of these strands together is the authoritarian insistence that their feelings should determine what is true, even as they are the F your feelings party, right? Even if all the empirical evidence cuts against what they wish to believe. This right-wing feelings over facts mentality is written directly into the recently passed state laws that have ushered in a new era of book banning. In Florida, the law signed by Republican Governor Ron DeSantis forbids schools to have any texts that might cause, quote, discomfort, guilt, anguish, or any other form of psychological distress. Similar language is used in many of the hundreds of book banning bills being introduced by Republicans in dozens of state legislatures. These laws were written to protect the delicate minds of right-wingers and are almost exclusively being interpreted as a tool to erase the realities of racism, homophobia, and misogyny from being taught in classes or portrayed in books. By the way, a point I don't think that's actually made here. Make room in this file for stand your ground laws, right? To protect the delicate minds of right-wingers. I don't believe I should have to go through the trouble of possibly losing by going to the courts and pleading not guilty and that I was acting in self-defense and letting the Castle Doctrine control. All of those things require a trial. And I don't believe I should have to have a trial because I'm a white guy. The black people should be on trial for things. That's the natural order of things in their minds. Why should I be troubled with having to defend myself? Shouldn't it be that the law automatically exonerates me before I even get to that stage? It's pretty similar, actually. So, in my view. Anyway, a recent Popular Information report on banned social studies textbooks, that's Judd Legum's thing, right? In the recent report on the social studies textbooks banned in Florida shows how this works. One book publisher was told they were violating the new law for acknowledging the basic truth that being enslaved is a terrible experience. And here are some of Judd's, I don't know whether they were tweets or toots. They're tweets because I can see the bird thing. He still uses the bird site, I guess. And here are his tweets attesting to this situation, but you know that this is true, right? Another textbook was rejected for acknowledging that Roe versus Wade ever happened, even though the language was oblique. And the example here is also illustrated with more embedded Judd Legum tweets. Expunging Trump's impeachments is just an expansion of this increasingly authoritarian view held by Republicans that reality must bend to their feelings. Indeed, the most famous example of this is Trump's big lie itself. Recent CNN polling shows that 63% of Republicans or Republican-leaning voters refuse to admit that President Joe Biden legitimately won the 2020 election. Interestingly, only 33% of GOP voters insist there's, quote, solid evidence of the big lie. There's not, of course, as it's a lie, a big one. That disparity demonstrates, though, that on some level, even many hardline authoritarians know that they're rejecting facts in favor of their fantasies, right? If 63% refuse to admit that Biden legitimately won, but only 33% will go so far as to say that there's solid evidence of that, then some 30% of Republicans are saying, I believe this despite the fact that I acknowledge there is no solid evidence of it. That's pretty crazy. They want to believe, of course, that Trump won, and so will insist on it no matter what. Okay. As Abigail Thorne of Philosophy Tube explained in a recent video, the most important thing to realize about conspiracy theories is they try to express something emotionally rather than say anything about how the world is. This, she added, is why believers are seemingly immune to evidence. Flat earthers, she points out, often respond with defensive prayers to shut out evidence that the earth is round. In the authoritarian mind, feelings should supplant facts, just so long as they're not your feelings, I guess. The winner of the election should be who they wish it was, not who actually won. They wish to believe that slavery was not a big deal, and so they banish any book that tells the truth. Now they wish to believe that Trump was never impeached, and so they are insisting on some kind of law that will declare their delusions to be the truth. Of course, in doing so, Republicans are unwittingly exposing their guilty consciences. If, as they claim, the impeachment charges were simply nonsense concocted for political reasons, they would have the confidence of mind to simply let the past be past. See how Democrats aren't particularly fussed about by talking about Bill Clinton's pointless impeachment, for example. Dredging all this up, especially in the face of many more Trump crimes being currently litigated in the courts, is a classic example of protesting too much. After all, Trump was acquitted by Senate Republicans. The fact that this isn't good enough for Republicans shows they are still bothered by the overwhelming evidence of Trump's guilt. Their over-the-top defensiveness is evident in all the various ways that Republicans exhaust themselves these days trying to deny obvious facts. It takes a lot of energy to erase the realities of slavery or Jim Crow from textbooks. Most people don't even see the point. But the language in the bills about guilt and distress speak volumes about the motivations of Republican book banners. They feel bad when reminded of these historical atrocities because they fear, for good reason, that they would have been on the wrong side of that debate if they were alive then. They want to banish the truth about Trump's extensive crimes for the same reason. It's hard to keep supporting Trump while pretending to be a good person. So instead, they lie and deny and insist their feelings should eclipse the facts that show their leader to be the unrepentant monster he is. It's a thought, and a good one. I think a good explanation of things and a good observation to make as long as they're going to continue to push this insane idea. If you want to make any sense of it whatsoever, I guess that's one way to do it. All right, let's see. I also mentioned earlier that there's mounting evidence of Jack Smith's and the DOJ's focus on activities in Bedminster that we earlier weren't privy to, but that turned out to have been the case nonetheless. And here's just a little more evidence in that file. The attention was all on Mar-a-Lago. Some of the action was at Bedminster. The New York Times helpfully reminds us. This is, again, Alan Feuer, Maggie Haberman, and Jonathan Swan. Interesting, it's a new reconfiguration of a rotating group that works with Feuer and Haberman on these stories, I think. And I think only a slight refinement of something we learned the other day. But refinement is refinement, and we'll talk about it. The inquiry into Donald Trump's handling of classified material revolved largely around his Florida club and residence and sex dungeon, but investigators were also quietly focused on his New Jersey property, and that's good news. But let's see. I mean, it's a relatively long article. I don't know. We'll see what can be sussed out of this one. Is there anything new? For all the attention focused during the investigation into former President Donald Trump's handling of classified documents at Perva-Lago, it turns out that there was a crucial, if quieter, role in the case for his 520-acre golf club in Bedminster, New Jersey. Perva-Lago grabbed the headlines last August after the search, of course, and then, of course, now the pictures of the documents and the boxes stacked up, including in the bathroom and on the stage, helped explain why prosecutors chose to indict him this month. But Bedminster, where Trump spends his summers, has turned out to also have been a focus of investigators, a flashpoint in the conflict between prosecutors and Mr. Trump's lawyers, and the scene of a central episode in the Trump indictment, a meeting in which he was recorded showing off what he described as a highly confidential plan to attack Iran. Okay, make note of that, though. Especially the mention that there's a thing that has become a flashpoint in the conflict and central to the indictment. It was cited in the indictment, but I've got another article to share with you that draws another subtle line of distinction. And perhaps this one not all that subtle. Anyway, that audio recording, which was published on Monday by CNN, we heard it yesterday, was the latest piece of evidence placing Bedminster on an almost equal footing with Pervalago as a key location in this case. Previously, unreported details of the investigation show that prosecutors working for Smith have subpoenaed surveillance footage from Bedminster, much like they did from Pervalago, and fought a pitched battle with Trump's lawyers late last year over how best to search the New Jersey property. At one point in the early fall of last year, investigators went so far as to discuss executing a search warrant at Bedminster, which we all thought they should have been doing, right? This, according to two people briefed on the matter. Investigators were concerned that more documents were stashed at the club, and the only way to account for them was to search the property. But one of the people said the Justice Department lacked probable cause to obtain a warrant from a judge. But it's a pretty strong supposition at that point, no doubt. The discussions about the warrant took place around the time that Jay Bratt, the top counterintelligence official at the Justice Department, told Trump's legal team that prosecutors believed that Trump still had more classified materials in his possession. Trump acquired Bedminster in 2002 and uses it as a seasonal escape from both New York and southern Florida. The property's role as a summer getaway made a cameo appearance in the indictment filed by Mr. Smith, and it is only a cameo appearance. Prosecutors said that Trump's co-defendant in that case, Walt Nauta, loaded boxes from Pervalago onto a plane that flew Trump and his family north for the summer on the same day that Mr. Bratt showed up in Florida to collect all the classified documents remaining there. As for the recording of Trump, it was made at Bedminster in July of 2021 during that meeting attended by two of his aides, identified by people with knowledge of the matter as Margot Martin, that's the one we knew about, and Liz Harrington, whose name we may have heard in the past, but I don't know if I saw her listed as having been at this meeting, but she was. And she sat in on some of Trump's book interviews that summer, as well as by a publisher and writer working on a memoir for Mark Meadows, Trump's final White House chief of staff. So that's, I guess, a third person. I thought it was Margot Martin working on that memoir, but I guess not. On the recording, Trump can be heard, of course, rustling through papers and describing for his guests a secret plan regarding Iran that he said had been drawn up by General Milley. And Greg mentioned that apparently it was actually drawn up prior to Milley's tenure as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. But anyway, Trump was describing the document in an effort to rebut an account that General Milley feared having to keep him from manufacturing a crisis with Iran. You know the background of this. Then he says, this totally wins my case, which it really doesn't. And for myriad reasons, I think discussed yesterday, I do want to reiterate the point that you might ask why that plan was presented to Trump. Trump says, this is him. He gave it to me. He gave this to me. Why did he give it to you, though? He didn't just walk in and say, hey, you know what? I got a great idea. We should attack Iran. He was probably responding to requests from your White House. What are the plans on Iran? Show them to me. Because I think mostly they just keep those plans to themselves. But we'll get there. Anyway, one of the women heard speaking on the recording was Ms. Harrington. Three people with knowledge of the matter said. Harrington, one of Trump's most aggressive defenders on Twitter, did not respond to questions about whether she is one of the voices talking on the recording. Harrington and Martin, who worked for Trump in the White House, and the other participants in the meeting could be important witnesses if Trump's case goes to trial, since they can provide firsthand descriptions of what he was showing as he discussed the Iran plan. A lawyer for Ms. Martin declined to comment. That was the point I was making to Greg. Yes, there's now more circumstantial evidence, i.e., Trump saying he's being heard. He's heard on the tape saying this. This proves my case. Take a look at this. It doesn't make any logical sense that he would be holding some other object or piece of paper and saying that, but he is an idiot, and that could be the case. He may be insane. We don't know. What we have is circumstantial evidence. There is no real logical reason why he would be saying, look at this, and describing it as a plan for attacking Iran and saying it proved his case. What good would some other document be in proving his case? Well, none. But then again, he's a moron, and so I would have to ask you, the proof, this again, the difference between evidence and proof. This is circumstantial evidence, and circumstantial evidence is fine, and sometimes it can be very strong. You would be very wise to ask in court, why would anybody have said what he said on that tape if that's not what he was holding in his hand? And logically, you would come to that conclusion. Yes, it's evidence. Is it proof? Well, the proof would be, presumably, people saying, I was there, I saw what was in his hand, and yes, it was, in fact, this classified document. Like if the witnesses get there and say, as weird as it is, it was a McDonald's promotional ad. It was his Monopoly game tickets. And we all wondered why he was pointing to that and saying that it was proof of his case against General Milley, but we all humored him. Like if that was the actual, if they produced that testimony, they may be lying. You might want to charge them with perjury if you could prove that he actually had the other document in his hand. But if you could prove that, great. Well, then you have a perjury case, and you don't need these witnesses either because you have other proof. But the only proof so far that anybody knows how to get would be asking the witnesses what was in his hand. That's the proof. They don't have that yet. When they have that, then you'll have something. We're no further along, really, in proving that those were the documents he had in his hand. We just have more reason to believe that they may have been. Okay. So, people close to Trump have suggested that the recording does not specify whether Trump actually showed a confidential document to anyone, and he told Bret Baier of Fox News last week that there was, quote, no document, yet the indictment states plainly in its first few pages that he did display a document, an assertion that appears to be backed up by his own words as captured by the recording. On Tuesday, in an interview with Fox News, maintained that there was nothing at odds with what he had told Mr. Baier. I said it very clearly. I had a whole desk full of papers, mostly newspaper articles, copies of magazines, copies of different plans, copies of stories having to do with many, many subjects, and what was said was absolutely fine, Mr. Trump said. I don't do things wrong. I do things right. I'm a legitimate person. All right, well, whatever. But also, by the way, he's actually digging the hole even deeper, saying how many copies of this, copies of newspaper articles, fine. Copies of magazines, fine. Copies of different plans. Oh, wait a minute. There we may have a problem. Different plans. Are they classified? Are they national security related? They shouldn't be in your hands at all, much less as copies. But okay. In an interview with Semaphore and ABC News aboard his private plane later on Tuesday, Mr. Trump again insisted he had no classified documents in the Bedminster meeting, saying his remarks were simply bravado, which is interesting for him to actually admit to. And he offered a new explanation for what the documents may have been and why he mentioned plans to Fox News. Did I use the word plans? Yes, you did. And that's what I was just calling you out for. What I'm referring to is magazines, newspapers, plans of buildings. I had plans of buildings. Building plans. I had plans of a golf course. Sure. But that's what you got to say to get out from under this, right? Stephen Chung, the spokes idiot for Trump, said the full context of the recording showed the former president did, quote, nothing wrong at all, or the opposite of what actually is shown. Shortly after the meeting at Bedminster, people in Mr. Trump's orbit were aware something unusual had happened, according to a person with knowledge of the events. The indictment describes Trump meeting with the people working on the book and members of his staff, none of whom possessed a security clearance. It also says that Trump showed and described, quote, a plan of attack, not a plan of a building or a plan of a golf course or a meal plan. Mr. Meadows' book contains a reference to a document that he claimed Trump said General Milley had typed himself. That's almost certainly not the truth. The president recalls a 4-page report typed up by Mark Milley himself. I mean, the typed up part is probably not true. It contained the general's own plan to attack Iran, which it apparently wasn't, deploying massive numbers of troops, which is what you would have to do to attack Iran, something he urged President Trump to do more than once during his presidency. Trump denied those requests every time. People close to General Milley have denied that he urged attacking Iran. Smith's indictment suggests that prosecutors have obtained a large amount of surveillance camera footage from Perv-a-Lago, some of it showing Mr. Nauta, Trump's co-defendant and personal aide, moving boxes in and out of a storage room in the basement of the compound. The movement of those boxes, undertaken at Trump's request, prosecutors say, lies at the heart of a conspiracy charge accusing Trump and Nauta of obstructing the government's efforts to reclaim all the classified materials that Trump took with him from the White House. But prosecutors also issued at least one subpoena for surveillance camera footage from Bedminster as well, according to two people familiar with the matter, and that's good news. The subpoena for that footage came sometime after the government's request for the Mar-a-Lago footage, the people said, though it remains unclear what the footage shows or precisely why prosecutors wanted to obtain it. One thing, however, is for certain. Even after the FBI searched Perv-a-Lago, Mr. Bratt and his team remained concerned that Trump was still holding on to classified documents in violation of a subpoena for them that the government had issued 3 months earlier. So, prosecutors contacted Trump's representatives in September, 1 month after the Perv-a-Lago search, to give the former president yet another chance to return any relevant material, according to the sealed court papers described to the Times. At first, Trump's lawyers refused to conduct further searches of his properties or provide a sworn statement certifying everything had been turned over. And that's a problem, too. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Let's continue and finish up this New York Times article. I think there's some subtle and interesting points I think that we're gleaning from all of this, but we just have to keep reading in order to get a total picture of what's going on here. But at least I'm very interested in the idea of having subpoenaed security footage from Bedminster as well. And I wonder whether, I'm very curious as to what footage they were after, what they thought they would see in it. I mean, if it's anything to do with, is he seen carrying any papers into this meeting at Bedminster? Or is it about moving boxes around or whatever? And I guess we'll have to wait and see. At first, Trump's lawyers refused to conduct those further searches, right, that they were asked to do. And they also refused to provide a sworn statement saying that everything had been turned over. So anything you could do to get out of the prosecution was rejected, which is pretty amazing all by itself. In making their refusal, the lawyers questioned the scope and validity of the initial subpoena and argued that Trump's presidential office might incriminate itself if more classified documents were discovered and returned. Well, you would have. That part is true. The government responded by filing a motion to compel compliance with the original subpoena, and a hearing was scheduled for late October in front of Judge Beryl Howell, who was then chief judge of the Federal District Court in Washington. One of Trump's former lawyers, Timothy Parlatore, has since suggested that Boris Epshteyn, another lawyer close to Trump, attempted to interfere with searches commissioned by the Trump legal team around that time. Mr. Parlatore made the remarks about Epshteyn in a CNN interview last month in which he cited his differences with Epshteyn as a key reason he had resigned from representing Trump. He later said Epshteyn did not commit any wrongdoing and called it a disagreement. I guess backpedaling from getting himself entangled in something legal or a lawsuit or something of that nature. Minutes before the hearing in front of Judge Howell, Parlatore alerted her and the government that a team of professionals with military training, interesting, had searched Bedminster for classified materials just days earlier. So there was a search. They were supervised by another one of Mr. Trump's lawyers at the time, James Trusty. Although I don't know who the professionals with military training were hired by. There is that question. It doesn't say that they were government hired. Maybe it was Trump. And the idea of touting that they had military experience, which shouldn't really have a great deal to do with anything, sounds like a Trumpy brag. You know, how do we know that the people you hired are any good? Well, they have military training. But, I mean, so what? Anyway, and yesterday we learned that the lieutenant colonel who had military training down in Florida was so panicked and terrible with his AR-15 that he shot out his own sliding glass doors. So military training means nothing, especially for this. But the Justice Department, according to court papers described by people familiar with them, was not impressed. It sounds like it wasn't their searchers. Prosecutors complained that the search had been limited to certain areas of Bedminster and was not accompanied by a sworn statement detailing which parts of the clubs had been examined. In the end, Judge Howell decided in favor of the government, no surprise, ordering Trump's lawyers to provide a sworn statement about which parts of Bedminster had been searched. She also told the lawyers to make a custodian of records for Trump's presidential office available to testify about the search in front of a grand jury. But no word here. That's the end of the article, so it doesn't say whether or not they actually complied and did provide that thing. Anyway, now I have another piece of information, another piece of the puzzle that I think we got to add to our understanding of things from CBS News. And, you know, I wonder, now I'm starting to wonder, things are becoming contradictory. We'll see if we can sort them all out or whether we just think somebody has to be corrected here on the record. This is CBS News. Andres Triay, I guess Triay. I have no idea how you'd pronounce that. Catherine Herridge and Robert Lagar, together writing this piece under the headline, Iran Memo not among the 31 records underlying charges in Trump federal indictment. While it's true that the indictment cites the meeting in Bedminster in which those swayed by logic believe that Trump did in fact brandish and display that Iran memo, none of the charges and none of the 31 documents underlying the charges in the Florida indictment include this memo, which I guess makes sense in that, the allegation is, of course, that he had it with him in New Jersey, not in Florida. Now, it may be the case that they can establish that the document did, in fact, travel to and from Florida as well. And I don't know whether they'll ever establish whether or not he showed that to anybody in Florida. But they may be able to establish that it was also in his possession. But that's not yet charged. And though they reference the meeting in which he brandished it more, it's offered up more as evidence of Trump's unwillingness to abide by the laws with regard to classification, and that at least a hint that some of these documents are moving from state to state along with him as well, and demonstrating his, studied indifference to proper handling of classified documents. But they're not charging him with the possession of that document in Florida. So that deserved, I think, to be cleared up here, and we'll read it to you the way the reporters have put it. The Defense Department memo on Iran, at the heart of the now public audio recording that captured a July 2021 meeting with former President Trump, is not part of the 31 counts of willful retention of national defense information charged in Special Counsel Jack Smith's indictment to the former president. A source familiar with the matter confirmed to CBS News. In the recording of the meeting at Trump's Bedminster Golf Club, the former president can be heard, what he's doing, talking about having the thing in his hand. It's like highly confidential, secret. This is secret information. Look at this, which is exactly what you don't want to say. about the information you just described as secret. See, as president, I could have declassified, but now I can't. Isn't that interesting? It's so cool. The document and recording are described in the indictment Smith's team secured against Trump earlier this month, recounted as an alleged meeting with a writer, a publisher, and 2 members of Trump's staff, none of whom possessed a security clearance. But according to a source familiar with the matter, Trump was not charged with unlawfully holding onto the Iran-related document discussed in the recording. Smith's 37-count indictment against Trump includes 31 charges of willfully retaining national defense information. It generally outlines each of the 31 classified records that prosecutors allege Trump illegally kept without naming the exact subject matter, and the Iran memo is not part of the list of the 31 records in the indictment, the source said. The source could be someone who read the descriptions, too. They did give us all the descriptions. We just didn't read it. Throughout the years-long federal investigation into Trump's White House records, investigators have collected more than 300 documents with classified markings on them, including 103 seized during the execution of a search warrant at Trump's Florida residence last year. Multiple sources familiar with the investigation previously told CBS News that defense attorneys were not certain the Iran memo in question was ever recovered and returned to the government. Still, the 2021 incident is one of 2 instances referenced in the indictment in which Smith describes Trump allegedly showing national defense information to individuals without proper clearance. Trump can be heard in the audio apparently acknowledging that he had a sensitive record after he left office and no longer had the power to declassify it. On Tuesday, Fox News asked Trump about the recording, and he insisted he did nothing wrong. You hear all about that. My voice was fine, Trump told Fox News. Why did anybody question that? What did I say wrong in those recordings? I didn't even see the recording, which is something you hear rather than see. All I know is I did nothing wrong. We had a lot of papers stacked up. In fact, you could hear the rustle of the papers, and nobody said I did anything wrong, except for the person who said, now we have a problem, of course. And in another interview, Trump told Semaphore that it was all bravado. You have all of that, right? I just held up a whole pile of, my desk is loaded up with papers. I have papers from 25 different things, he said. The existence of the audio tape and the 2021 meeting was first reported by CNN, which was also first to obtain a recording of the discussion. Sources familiar with the matter said this discussion of the allegedly classified document arose as Trump was talking about Mark Milley. We know all about that. And who had been portrayed in a story in the New Yorker as having fought in the last days with the Trump administration to keep the president from attacking Iran. In a recording of the meeting, you know all about that. Let's see. Smith's office declined to comment. Earlier this month, Trump pleaded not guilty. We know about that. Nauta was set to be arraigned in Miami federal court on Tuesday, but flight troubles, allegedly, and difficulty securing local legal counsel delayed the hearing until next week. So now we've got that part on the record, too. Okay, so, a lot of subtleties that are involved in all of this, and, it's of interest. Now, let's see. Is this of interest? It may be. Let's close out with some opinions from people who are actually, I guess, more familiar with classified documents and their handling. We'll stick with that as a subject. It being only Wednesday, there's plenty of time left, Thursday and Friday, to cover all the rest of the things I have for you. This is from an opinion piece in the Washington Post by Sue Gordon. Does she have a description of her background anywhere in all of this? I don't know. Sue Gordon writes, our job was to brief Trump on intelligence. His job was to protect the secrets. All right. Sue Gordon was the principal deputy director, here it is, of national intelligence from 2017 to 2019 and a 30-year veteran of the intelligence community. So in other words, she worked as principal deputy director of national intelligence during the Trump administration. And now is telling us just how bad he was during that time. Okay, better late than never. Just before President Donald Trump left office in January of 2021, I recommended in these pages, Washington Post, I guess, that Joe Biden forego the courtesy of providing his predecessor the occasional intelligence briefings that some former presidents have received after leaving office. I briefed Trump many times in the Oval Office, and I cautioned that he had too many overseas interests, as well as obvious plans to remain a political actor and too little understanding of the tradecraft involved in gathering the information to add more risk of exposure. As it was, I cautioned, he leaves office with knowledge of some of our most precious intelligence assets in his head. And what a terrible head it is, right? We should be aware of that. But I can see now that I underestimated the situation. Trump left office, federal prosecutors now assert, with some of our most precious intelligence assets in his pocket. Never mind his head, right? I know too many people risked far too much to get that information for it to be stacked in boxes, unsecured, in a ballroom of a Florida resort. This is not something I imagined could ever occur. Nor do I believe our system accounts for not being able to trust a former commander-in-chief to feel the same responsibilities and live with the same burden that others who have access to that information do. If it did, we would have individual intelligence officers deciding what information to safely give a president while in office, and that would be an abysmal situation. Our system assumes that swearing to uphold and defend the Constitution creates mutual trust for each party to do their assigned job. Yeah, that's a problem. We don't actually have that. There's a lot of confusion about why national security material is classified, why it's important that it's handled properly, and who gets to have access to what. Because information creates the opportunity for our side to act before events limit our choices, and because our adversaries, or adversaries as people here in the United States like to say, and competitors relentlessly pursue what we know because they understand its value, there is always a balance between sharing it for use and protecting it for future advantage. Classification is a specialized lexicon used to let people know how sensitive any data or assessment is and guide them to protect it properly. There are a lot of things to protect. The information itself, the means by which it was acquired, because sources and methods are part of the advantage, and how damaging it would be to have the information revealed to those who would use it to advance their interests over ours. The higher the classification, the more rules there are for protection, and the fewer the people who have access to it. All because of its relative value and the risk it creates if exposed. Unauthorized disclosure of sensitive national security information is always bad. Typically done for narrow, individual, not national purpose, such disclosures lead to damage and unintended consequences. Authorized disclosure, conversely, can actually create advantage because it's hard for evil to succeed in the light. Both the 2018 decision by the Trump administration to share what we knew about Russian involvement in the attempted assassination with fourth-generation nerve agents of a former Russian military officer and his daughter, and the 2022 decision by the Biden administration to share what we knew about how Russian President Vladimir Putin would try to justify his aggression toward Ukraine are two great examples of declassifying information to advance our national interests. Some have asked, if a president has access to sensitive information and has the power to declassify it if it serves the national interest, what's the problem with a former president taking that information home with him, sharing it with whomever he wants, and storing it as he sees fit? But that's just a dumb question. The answer is simple. When he was president, his job gave him access. He had the authority to make the decisions about sharing. And there was a structure around him executed by career professionals who were bound by statute and policy to ensure the information was handled properly. When he was no longer president, he no longer had either. I don't know precisely why Trump kept all these documents, but the possibilities are unappetizing, and they range from fundamental misunderstanding of or lack of concern for the import of the information to retention for purposes of leverage in future action, which is exactly what he was saying he was using it for in Milley's case. The reason I'm showing you this is this totally proves my case. It doesn't, but he believed it does. He was still waging war with General Milley and thought his retention of this document would help him win that war. Anyway, but I do know this. He had the documents because he was president and commander-in-chief, responsible for ensuring the nation's security. In support of that role, the agencies of the national security community provided him documents and briefings on the threats facing America and its interests and on the capabilities of the United States to counter those threats. It was their job to provide the information and the president's job to use the information to further the nation's interest and protect the capabilities that created such advantage. The only duty to national security that he retained upon leaving office was the lifelong responsibility not to disclose the information. And he's now being held accountable for his alleged failure to do so, as our system demands. Okay. So, let me then add to the record this. I had been awaiting this, I guess, the next installment in Evan Corrin's discussion of the classified documents, because he professionally was involved in the handling of classified documents and the classification of those documents. And he offers us this piece from his Substack, Snapshot, as he calls it. And the title is Part 1 of National Security Classification Markings, Indictment Edition, which he wrote back on the 22nd. I now have time to share it with you. Let's look at the classification markings and descriptions listed in the indictment of former President Trump to more fully understand the national defense information he's charged with willfully retaining. To best understand the format and classification of classification markings, the two most useful tools are, ready to become an expert? 1, the National Security Classification Markings Handbook, which the Information Security Oversight Office, or ISOO, publishes. ISOO is the part of the National Archives and Records Administration that oversees the national security classification and declassification system for the entire executive branch. While on the ISOO staff, I, Evan Corrin, that is, served as the senior staffer with day-to-day responsibility for the National Security Classification Markings Handbook, including providing guidance to agencies on markings. That's why we're reading his stuff. And the other piece of information or tool most helpful in understanding things, the Register and Manual, which the Office of the Director of National Intelligence maintains. ODNI, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, ODNI coordinates all changes to the Register and Manual through the Interagency Classification Management Implementation Working Group. It's got its own abbreviation, CMIWG. 1 or 2 ISOO staff attend CMIWG meetings as advisors, and I, Evan Corrin, was one of the advisors representing ISOO at these meetings. So, kind of knows what he's talking about. The version of the Register and Manual linked to in this article is the most recent publicly available version, dated 2016. It was released with some redactions as a result of the Freedom of Information Act request in 2021. Government personnel reading this should go through official channels to get the current version to mark documents. This released version, however, is sufficient to provide better public context to the markings on the documents Trump is indicted for willfully retaining. So a little bit of a warning there. There's no general public access to the most current version, but generally speaking, I guess all the definitions that we're going to be talking about are pretty much the same. Now, an overview of markings format. All markings are tools to communicate to recipients of information that, 1, the information they are receiving needs to be protected on authorized national security grounds, and 2, how to handle that information. Background on this can be found here at a link, National Security Classification Markings, The Thought Behind It. Another of his entries in his Substack publications. The markings listed in the indictment are the banner markings listing the overall classification of each document. The Register and Manual on page 17 provides the format for classification markings as, and there's a graphic embedded here telling us about how to read the classification markings. The screenshot is from, as I said, the Register and Manual, but we'll digest it here. A slightly easier way to think of it is there are different types of markings. The Register and Manual calls the different types of markings categories. All right? These types of markings have an established order that they are listed in. Creating or reading a banner marking is done by following a formula. The types of markings are separated by the double slash marks. You can see that there's a sample marking given in the graphic that he shows, and there are all sorts of codes and abbreviated words, etc., that are separated by slashes and double slashes. And he notes that the double slashes are separating the different types of markings. Some types of markings have multiple items that can be included at the same time, and these are separated from each other by a single slash. Key to the terms is provided here. SCI, we've heard this before, is sensitive compartmentalized information. There are multiple compartments and subcompartments of SCI, each used to limit access so that only a set group of people can see it. SCI is classified national intelligence information concerning or derived from intelligence sources, methods, or analytic processes. These tend to indicate the type of collection used to obtain the information in the document. So it's common in declassification to redact these markings to protect the intelligence source if the substantive content of the document could be declassified without revealing the source. SAP is Special Access Program. SAPs are a more restrictive limitation on access. There are multiple different SAPs, each with their own code word that indicates the information is protected by a particular SAP. This is what is often thought of as code word information and is often the most sensitive and protected information the government has. Many code words themselves are classified. The Atomic Energy Act creates a separate classification system for nuclear information. The Atomic Energy Act markings most frequently used are restricted data, or RD, and formerly restricted data, or FRD. Restricted data is information on the design, manufacture, or utilization of atomic weapons, the production of special nuclear material, or use of special nuclear material in the production of energy. Formerly restricted data is information that relates primarily to the military utilization of atomic weapons. And then foreign government information, or FGI, is information that other countries share with the U.S. through official channels with the intent that the U.S. protect that information. This can be intelligence collected by foreign intelligence services related to terrorist activity, country or multiple countries of mutual concern, or international crime, money laundering, and or drug trafficking. It could also be information about a foreign government's own plans or goals regarding military operations, negotiations, or policy changes that have yet to be made public. The overall format, in layman's terms, is basically those markings that you see with all the slashes are going to be the classification level, then the SCI marking, then any SAP marking, then any Atomic Energy Act marking, foreign government information marking, and then after that, intelligence community dissemination control markings, and any other dissemination control marking. If one of these types of markings isn't relevant to the document, it's skipped. They don't have to have every single one of them there. An example of a marking with some foreign marking types skipped would be if it's marked secret // SI/TK / no foreign, right? Classification level, SCI marking, intelligence community dissemination control marking. Got it? No, it doesn't make any sense when it's read aloud to you, but the point is, all relevant controls are in the marking up at the top. A document by document analysis, well, this is provided here. And this thing you'll have to go over on your own time. They take a look at each of the documents listed. This is the level that you want to get down to if you're reading along with Empty Wheel, right? You'll take a look at that document that they provided with the charts showing the 31 different documents that Trump was charged with retaining, not including the Iran document, apparently. And that will tell you not necessarily the contents of each document, but the markings of classification that each one bore, and you are going to be able to then understand from Evan's guide to these markings what the listed markings actually mean and what sort of possible danger the retention of these documents will, you'll get a particular version rather than a generalized sense of, well, it's classified information. You'll get a better idea of exactly what sort of classified information it actually is. Okay. We got to end it on that. We're never going to get through all of that. And it's almost time to roll our outro music and hand things over to Justice Putnam for that familiar following act, the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Well, there's a lot more to get to, but I think we had to spend another day focused on the former guy and what he's up to. No doubt about that. And of course, the fact that there really was some attention being paid to what was going on in Bedminster. And, all right, so I think you got a lot of tools to help you unravel some of this stuff that you'll see. Tomorrow we'll return with yet more of the craziness, and of course, they'll probably commit even more craziness in between now and then. But for now, time for Justice Putnam to get his crack at deciding on the important stories of the day, what he's got for you so far. The Supreme Court ruled against the right's slow-motion insurrection. Yes, the independent state legislature theory was shot down yesterday, but there was, of course, strong dissent from the idiots on the right. Then, on the rest of his menu, Pennsylvania caseworkers who ignored years of child abuse now face felony charges. A federal watchdog reports that more than $200 billion may have been stolen from two large COVID-19 relief initiatives. Oh boy. And New Mexico reached a settlement with the Department of Energy over a permit renewal for the federal government's only underground repository for nuclear waste. Huzzah for that, I guess. And then, of course, more from around the world. I'll hold that in reserve for after this.
From netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, this one not on our radar. Former Audi boss Rupert Stadler was convicted of fraud in connection with the automaker's diesel emissions scandal, and Germany documented 2,480 incidents of anti-Semitism in the country last year, just under 7 incidents per day on average, and you got to worry about that when it's happening anywhere. But Germany, yeah, in particular.